I believe Mrs. Brand will be here later on, and the secretary will record the members of the administration who are here. Will you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to our next item of business, which for some is a happy moment, but for some of us is a bit of a sad moment. I will turn to Dr. Clark to start. We have recognition of Board of Education members who are retiring, and after she speaks, I will have some words also.
Thank you, Mrs. Albin. The 3 Board of Education members who are leaving the board tonight have been with us for 6 years. And you are the first board members with whom I served your full term. There are 2 people on the board who were here when I was appointed as superintendent, but the 3 of you came on and have worked really, really hard for 6 years. We do have a small presentation I would like to make to each of you, and as you know, when board members leave us, we dedicate books in the library on behalf of you for all of your service, and you get to tell us the schools. I'm going to do this in alphabetical order. We'll start with Ms. Dodson, who served as the Board of Ed rep on various committees, PTA Council. Does that seem like a long time ago? Another lifetime. 66 Magnet School, the Policy Committee, Finance, Budget, and Community Relations Committee, and you were very instrumental in the later start time at both high schools. You've been very involved and always wanted to put kids first, which we sincerely appreciate. And Ms. Dodson, which was no surprise, would like the books donated to the Ward Library. I'd like you to have a chance to see them, and maybe Mr. Quinn can take them later, so congratulations. Would you like to say a word, Ms. Dodson? I would. This is something. I don't know if you know this, but Ms. Dodson is a writer, and so one of the books the library media specialist chose was a publication manual, which we think is very appropriate.
Of the American Psychological Association. We should all get that. Somehow fitting. Oh, and then, oh my goodness, the national parks. You know, I saw this. We watched this at home, and I decided unilaterally on behalf of my family that next summer we were going to take 2 months and visit every national park. And then my husband wisely said, yeah, you and 10 million other people who saw the kindergarten special. Thank you. Thank you for this. Jim? I just want to talk for a minute to thank you all, members of the board, the administration, the building administrators, all the parents who have been involved in education over the years, the teachers, the curriculum leaders, the building principals. It's really been a privilege to serve this school district. I have to thank my family too for putting up and tuning out, putting up with all this. They acquired a very good ability to tune out all the intense phone calls, the hours on email. Either they tuned it out or they were taking notes for the book. I just have such respect for everybody who works for this school district and starting. Oh, first of all, I'd like to make a request. For our last night here, can we all refer to each other by our first names?
Okay, can we do that? Helen, it works for me.
Some people may not realize we have first names. I just have so much respect for everybody, starting with you and
back, you've upped the bar for this school district and every school district in the state and the region. You really have, you talk about putting kids first, and you really showed this board how to do that and showed the town how to do that. I can't say enough about our school administrators, our principals, and none more so than our high school principals, Jim and Dave and Nancy before you, and of course Jim Perna and Frank Taddo. They walk such a difficult road, and you don't, when your kids are in elementary school, you just don't realize how quickly you will be there, and it's just the most tentative time in a kid's life, and in good times and bad, they are there for the kids. And I urge our new board to really get to know all the schools, but the high schools in particular, because of the sensitivity of that time in the kids' lives. You'll be amazed and I think really appreciative. I'm proud of this board because we've had many differences through the years, but this board has never been driven by partisan political concerns, and I hope people realize that. And we've been divided ideologically, but never in a partisan way. And I'm very proud of that, and I hope everyone on this board is. To the new board, I just want to say a word about curriculum. It's easy not to pay attention to curriculum because it's abstract. It's easier to focus on things like buildings and capacity, and because it's easier to see. Curriculum's harder, and I really worry. I worry that we're losing ground in the sciences, and it's not because kids in other countries are necessarily smarter, but that they get challenged earlier, I think, and I just hope as the new board moves forward that you will just not take your eyes off the curriculum. And by the way, I bequeath to everyone who's staying on in the new board, the music department. Hi, Tom. The music department may not seem like curriculum to some people, but it absolutely is, and it by strengthening kids' musical abilities, it strengthens them in other areas, not just math and science, but every area imaginable. And I encourage everybody to go to the high school concerts in particular that are coming up around the holidays, the Candlelight at Ludlow and the Caroline at Ward. You will be amazed at what you see. And it starts way back in the elementary grades, the prowess that they have at the time they're in high school. I guess that's all I wanted to say. I'm so thankful to have had this experience, as difficult as it was, and thankful to all of you and board members who preceded you. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Ms. Kopchak served as the Board of Ed rep on the RTM, Parks and Rec, CAVE, and chaired the Facilities, Technology, and Long-Term Planning Committee. It's been a very busy tenure, and congratulations, Ms. Kopchak is leaving us to go back to the RTM, which we sincerely appreciate. I'm sorry, may I call you Brenda?
Yes.
Brenda has asked that her collection of books go to McKinley, Stratfield, and Fairfield Woods Middle School, which I think you can maybe explain to people why these schools are so dear to you. And congratulations.
Well, Helen, I didn't prepare remarks. I was going to, and it would have been a book, like you were saying. I too would like to thank the administrators as well, because when you come on the board as a new member, even if you've been in elected office before, as I had, it's a learning curve, and you're new, and it's a big deal. And it's so helpful to have people here to answer your questions, and Ann and Jack, Tom, Gary, Anthony, Mary, Anna, any question I ever had about anything. Just gave them a call and they tell me. And it really helped me get up to speed that first year. For somebody who's pretty outspoken, I was pretty quiet my first year on the board of ed. I wanted to learn, and there's really no better way to learn than to listen. And I listened a lot. And then I wasn't quiet so much anymore. I want to thank my family as well, because as Helen says, it's really difficult on a family being on a board of education. And anyone who's been on a board of education and anyone who's on one now, and our new members will know that it's a lot. There's tons of emails, there's phone calls, there's people stopping you everywhere you go. Thank God for Peapod. It's been something, and like Helen said, you know, you get really close to the people that you work with, and when Helen, Dave, and I ran in 2003, we didn't run really on a party platform. It was more ideology, and there was a bond really of that group of people who ran, but then of the three of us, sort of that splinter of a group that had started very grassroots, standing at the microphone at Board of Ed meetings in jeans and sweatshirts, you know, telling the board off, and which we were all pretty good at. And it's actually ironic because I liked being on the RTM, and I never wanted to run for the Board of Ed, never. And I just didn't want to run for the Board of Ed. And it just so happens I had my arm twisted pretty good by a lot of parents, in good-heartedness. They wanted me to do it. And I feel proud of the work we did. And like I like to say, in being in elected office for 10 years, I like to say there's hallmark moments that you have. And I've said this before, that you feel proud about, because a lot of it's minutia and details and things that aren't really fun or exciting or racy. But then there's those things like the high school start time for Helen and for me, the rebuilding of McKinley School and building projects all across the town. I really have always had a passion for making sure our buildings were in better condition, and I personally feel very proud of this central office administration and this board for the due diligence that we did, because I think our buildings are beautiful, and they weren't really beautiful 10 years ago. So that's something I think we can all hang our hat on, and I'm personally proud of it. I chose McKinley School because I actually went to McKinley School for a year, and my son went there for his whole elementary school time, and a lot of members of my family, even my own father went to McKinley School. And I chose Stratfield School because I've been involved with their community a lot, and so I chose them in Fairfield Woods because I went to Fairfield Woods. So that's why I chose these books, and these are really great. The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I like that. So I do thank you, and I have to be quite honest. I'm happy that we're done, because I think 6 years is enough to be on the board. It's a lot of work, and new people need to come on and fresh faces. I will leave new members with a bit of advice that to remember history, because you'll just spin your wheels when you come up here. Doing the same thing a board did 3 years ago and coming up with maybe the same result, instead of trying new things or looking into the future and progressing, instead of trying to go back and reinvent things that maybe have already been done. But I wish everyone good luck, and I appreciate this time on the board, and I'm really excited. It's my last meeting.
Mr. Weber, served as the chairman of the board from 2005, vice chairman from 2005 to 2006, and was chair from 2006 to 2007. He served as a rep on the Tomlinson Building Committee. Do you remember all those meetings? The Board of Health, PTA Council, SEPTA, the Bylaws Review Committee, and is now on the Curriculum Policy and Special Programs Committee. And I'm sure it comes as no surprise to anyone, the school he'd like the books to go to is Sherman.
Well, I'll just show everyone the books. Margaret Peterson's Haddocks, which is book 2. I guess this is science fiction.
Very popular with the kids.
Okay, and then Masterpiece, which is, it looks like a E.B. White Reading Award winner by Lee Scroach. And 2 more.
We did all the different ages.
Oh, good. A book, pretty generic title. And then The Great Fuzz Frenzy. And thank you very much for the books. They mean a lot to me. We actually spent a lot of time at Sherman talking about books, and the PTA did a great job at bringing a lot of books over there. It was one of the things that we did on that Sherman PTA so many years ago, and I had a lot of fun on that, and got to meet so many wonderful people that I still am best friends with. I don't see them as much anymore. It happens when your kids get older. You see less and less of the parents. Those days were great. I started out at Sherman. My daughter went there and I wasn't involved at all, but Mr. Mr. Geritano, who was one of my best friends in life, frankly, along with Mr. Boyle, and they were classmates at Boston College, unfortunately. There are better Jesuit schools.
You just wanted to go, you couldn't get in.
But he was great. He was an inspiration at that school and did so many great things at PTA, not only raising money, but just contributing so much time. It was a wonderful community, and that's why I chose it. The first thing I did there was Dad's Night Out, and I thought it was when all the dads went to the local tavern and raised money. And then they told me to go to a meeting, and it actually was this event, and I don't know if any fathers are here from Sherman, but you actually had to run 25 separate athletic events in the school simultaneously, and the bells would ring, and all the kids would just kind of scramble, but it was a lot of fun. And from there, I got involved with the PTA as treasurer and kind of slowly moved into it, learning about the politics of the town, which I think and I've always thought was very important. And the RTM with Brenda and Alexa was on that RTM as well. And the only issues that interested me, quite frankly, were educational. And so I decided to run for the board. At that time, we were still dealing with the 2 high school issue, and it was unfortunate. It was a very divisive issue, and I hope we never, ever again in this town have to deal with something like that. There are some people today who still don't speak to each other because of it, and it's extremely unfortunate that we had to go through that. Hopefully it will never happen again. We spend so much time on facilities. We've spent, so many taxpayer dollars, I think $200 million gross for state reimbursement. We put up so many new schools. But the one I'm most proud of is McKinley. That school is really a beacon for the kids that live in that community. I think we've addressed a lot of the issues. To me, it's always about how you treat the kids who need the most help, which really is the measure of your school system. Ms. Lenardi has done a wonderful job. It's a great special ed program in this town. I'm very, very proud of that. And all the administrators here, it was enjoyable. Thank you very much. And Dr. Clark, what can I say about it? I think you're wonderful. You've done a great job, and I will miss working with you. Thank you.
As I said earlier, for some this might be a happy night, but for some of us it's a little bit sad. For me, it will be sad to not come to the table with these 3 board members who I've spent 6 years with. And I could tell some stories about the 6 years, but I promised Ms. Dodson I wouldn't embarrass her and other people, so I won't tell the stories. But it has been 6 very good years. We've been through some difficult issues, which you can't be on the Board of Education without encountering difficult issues. And your words, Mrs. Kupchak, were very, very well put. It's always wise to listen and learn. And I think anyone who has been here long enough knows that that's an important piece when you first come here. And I will miss you all, but you I'm hoping to go skiing with, so get them waxed. And we're going to start running.
We are?
Yes. And I don't know what we're doing, Mr. Weber, but we'll come up with an idea. And well, you'll have to go to my husband's tailgates again. And so, pardon me, but if there are other members of the board that wish to say anything at this time, we're going to certainly take enough time to thank these board members. And then there are some members of the family and the public who are sitting out there who would like to speak to them as well. I see 2 former board members and one sitting who has more time on this board than me, so he knows what it's like to sit here for these long hours. And but not taking anything away from Mrs. Milady, who did her 6 years too. There was one thing that when I was first elected to the board 10 years ago, that someone said to me, "How long is the term?" And I looked at them and said, "No, it's how long is the sentence?" Yes. And they don't let you off for good behavior, but you've been good, so now your sentence is up, guys. Is there anyone else who would like to offer anything? Mr. Mottola, before I go to the public.
Yes. I just wanted to thank all of you for your time. I've been here 4 years now. You know, we've had a lot of contested, heated issues, but you know, we said a few things to each other too that we probably wouldn't want to repeat in public. So looking at this Kupchak. Yeah, but we've always been able to, for lack of a better term, get over that and you know, and laugh about it and you know, move on. So I mean, I could go on for a long time, but I'm not going to. Just thank you so much. Thank you.
Same thing. I just want to thank the 3 of you for stepping up to the plate and doing your community service. You know, I mean, it's a wonderful thing.
It wasn't that bad.
No, I mean, I appreciate anybody that puts time in, and it's the same thing like John said. We don't always agree on issues. I don't take things personally. I hope you guys don't if we're not on the same issue, and wish you the best of luck.
I think this board, unlike many others, has a tremendous amount of time commitment involved, as you said, when you go to the grocery store, wherever you are. I know back in like January, one of the political parties, I think which I'm a member, was trying to bring in candidates for a number of offices. And I looked at the ones that were considering the Board of Education, and I looked at them and I said, welcome to the Board of Education. We take care of your most precious possessions, your children and your money. And when you're doing that, it doesn't matter which way you turn, it's a difficult task. So you should be commended for the service that you did and the commitment taking care of our most precious possessions, and I thank you.
If there's no one else here who wants to speak, I will open to the public. If you would come forward and please just state your name so that we'll have it on the record. It's just about speaking to these three retiring board members at this time. There'll be public comment later on.
Hi, my name is Leonard Benton. I'm Brenda's dad, and I'm a real proud dad tonight. A little nervous here, but I'll get over it. And I am a graduate of McKinley School. I'm a lifetime resident of Fairfield, 72 years, and I've seen a lot of changes in this small town. I spoke here once before in front of this board when my daughter sat on this board. It's about when they were doing the name change on the high schools. And I'm originally from the Roger Ludlow era. And I stated then that how Roger Ludlow sent his first pro football player to the Philadelphia Eagles, Dave Graham, who I believe is still alive today. But you know, I'm really, as a dad, I know where Brenda gets her feisties from. Yeah. Believe me, I can be pretty feisty. You know, I was thinking, you know, I had emailed Pam and asked her if she could find a way that I could speak tonight, because I didn't know what, as Pam said, the protocol is of how you would address this board. And she emailed me back. She was very gracious, and I want to thank you, Pam. And then I left a message for the Madam Chairperson to see if I could speak and say something about my daughter. And I'm very proud of my daughter, because I really didn't know that Brenda had all these qualities, I guess, because when you become a parent, you go on with your life, you go to work, and you try to provide for your family, and then you hope that you're bringing up your children in the right way. And I think Brenda's greatest asset comes from her great-grandparents. My grandfather and grandmother, who migrated from Italy back in the late 1800s. And they were, you know, poor people from Italy, didn't speak any English and didn't do anything. But they were ingrained in one thing that was instilled in them was hard work and perseverance. And to be respectful of others. And I think that was instilled in Brenda by her mother and I. And I think Brenda's greatest asset comes from is that she cares. That's her greatest asset. She cares, and that's where it comes from. I've been serving in this in the public service, and you know, Brenda got me to run for the RTM this last election because they needed another Republican. And of course, Brenda signed me up as a Republican. I always thought I was an independent, but she signed me up. So I ran on the RTM, and I said to myself, I'm going to try to make this brief. RTM, and I said, well, how is an unknown 72-year-old man, has never been in any political life, done anything politically, anything at all, and never did anything in school, anything like that. I said, my greatest asset is Brenda Kopchak, because I work for Honda Westport. I'm a salesman, as you can probably tell. And every time a parent came in with children from Fairfield, I say, do you know Brenda Kopchak? Oh, I know Brenda. Never said, they always say, I know Brenda. Everybody knows Brenda. So I had Brenda make up a letter saying, never mentioned that I was her father, and passed it around. There's 101 streets in the 5th district, and I got my son, Chris, and 2 of his friends. I paid them minimum wage, and we went to 70 streets and passed that letter. And my daughter explicitly told me not to put it in the mailbox because it was against the law. So we got it done. And because of that, it just says, Brendan, come to find out, I lost by 3 votes. And the reason I lost by 3 votes is because my family didn't go to vote. So what I want to say is that when I was at the polls, and now I know how my daughter worked those long hours, I was at the poll for 14 hours. For 14 hours. I was there from 4 to 6. In fact, I was leading the election. I was the first to vote. So I just want to say that when I walked up to people, I had the little palm cards, Brenda, palm cards, and I highlighted in highlighter Brenda Kopchak. And I would just go up to people and say, this is my daughter Brenda. Oh, I know Brenda. So I just want to say with this that I'm proud that I know Brenda. That's my daughter. Thank you, Brenda. I love you.
I'm Jim Lee, and I served with all three of you for 4 of your 6 years, and I am proud to have known all three of you. It was refreshing, and you have set a high standard for those who come after you. And more than that, I was thinking of, I thought about two things. One is, when I left the board, there were two thoughts in my mind that I had, in my own mind at least, and I think you will have in your own minds, fulfilled the Athenian ideal of leaving the place better than you found it. And then coupled with that was, I had to tell people, don't be sad. I'm not dead, I'm free. And you will discover too, starting, probably in not as many as 5 hours, the joys of freedom. It has been refreshing to serve with all three of you in different ways. And I remember, I'm older than I look, when each of you got involved, I encouraged, I think, all of you. And in Brenda's case, it was funny because the first time we met, we were on the opposite side of an issue. Remember that one? The middle school referendum? I don't remember, I think you won. But what I said was, I like the way you're talking, we're on different sides of this issue, but stick around and stay involved. And you did, and you still are. Thank you all for your service.
J. Albert Dunn, I would be remiss if I let this moment slip by. There are two individuals on this board who are leaving, one going on to another self-inflicted situation called afternoon. Fortunately, I'm the epitome of sloth. I'm going nowhere. Now, one member who is retiring mentioned curriculum. Unfortunately, the person does not sit with the state legislature because they are the ones who denote what will be taught and what won't be taught. And we certainly, not are slipping, have slipped. The other member who is departing from that crowd over there at Osborne Hill on the last Monday night in the month, there are two situations that sort of cripple that person. One is common sense, and the other is logic. Bad. However, continue to be crippled by that situation, because there are a good many of us that refuse to be confused by facts and try and bring a little illumination into caverns of darkness. Thank you.
I think it was, what, 2 years ago, maybe almost to the night, that I told you guys, don't worry, it'll go by fast. And I guess it did. I think the only thing I really want to say, aside from thank you for following me onto the board and helping this district get better. A lot of times we look back on our lives. If you look back on the last 6 years, you can point to things and say, I was part of that. Not everybody can do that. You've been part of so much in this district. It's completely different than it was 10 years ago, 6 years ago. And I can attest to the fact that Brenda's first year on the board, she really didn't say much. I really enjoyed that. It was a really good year. But all good things must come to an end. As it is with your service to this board, because what you brought to this community, I don't think will be duplicated. And I just want to thank you for allowing me to share 4 good years on this board with you. Thank you.
Incidentally, that was one of the arm twisters. And here's another one. Deanne O'Shaughnessy, Queens Grant Road. I want to say to Brenda's father, my father liked Brenda's feistiness too. He came from Minnesota and he saw her at a meeting and he said, "Who is that?" And he's a feisty redheaded guy. So I want to thank the 3 of you for your contribution to this town. Without you, perhaps we would have gotten a second high school eventually, but we would not have gotten it when we did. And you have created a new town for us. I'm involved with the high school, as you know, and I can see all the things that because of you we have. We have twice as many kids in sports. We have twice as many kids or more in AP classes. We have twice as many kids in activities, and on and on and on. And I wanted to tell you the other night, the people were talking at the polls about the rivalry, how we couldn't do it because of the rivalry. The Ludlow girls volleyball team was in the FCX, and the Ward volleyball girls were there to cheer them on. So that was really, really special to see that. I think that the rivalry has been a lot of fun and a lot of excitement, and it brings a real energy to both schools. I think it's been phenomenal. So in closing, thank you for such a positive impact on this town. We as a community are fortunate that you have done great work for our children and for our town, and that you are leaving this place a lot better than when you started. Thank you. Kudos to you.
If there are no other people wishing to speak just to the item for the board members, we will move on. Moving on to our next item, we have approval of minutes, and there is a recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the special meeting of October 27th, 2009, 7 p.m., and the special meeting of October 27th, 2009, 7:30 p.m. Moved by Mrs. Iacono and seconded by Ms. Dow. Questions, comments from members of the board? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? The item passes unanimously. Moving on to our next item is public comments and petitions. During this period, the board will hear comments and receive petitions from any citizen present at the meeting. Any single presentation must be limited to 2 minutes, and audiovisual equipment cannot be used without the advance authorization of the chairman. The board will not hear comment on individual personnel matters or comments addressed to a specific member or members of the board. Decorum will be enforced, and citizens are asked to comment on any voting item at the time the item is under consideration by the board. If there are any members of the public wishing to address the board at this time, please come forward stating your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Meredith McCormick, Fairfield Beach Road, and I come here tonight in my position as the budget rep for Sherman School. While the addition of the annex has been wonderful at Sherman, we appreciate your support in getting that done. I just want to make sure you don't forget about our core facilities. I know there is money earmarked in the long-range facilities plan to upgrade Sherman's core facilities. I want to make sure the cafeteria's needs are included and addressed. Students are lining up the entire length of the cafeteria waiting just to buy their hot lunch. By the time they purchase it and sit down, they have maybe 7 to 10 minutes to eat it, and on a pizza day, forget about it. My kids, won't even go near the hot lunch for that reason. They barely have time to eat their lunch that I pack for them. It's simply just not enough time to have these kids eating lunch. So I'm just asking you tonight to please make sure an additional service line in Sherman's cafeteria is part of the long-range facilities plan so we can provide lunch for these students in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board? Thank you.
Hi, Mark Newman, 189 Woodside Circle. On October 13th, Mrs. Albin led the board in discussion of items that the board should look at this academic year. I unfortunately could not make the last meeting, which I would like the board to consider bringing up one other thing, which is long-term special needs planning. On October 5th, a national report released by the Journal of Pediatrics indicated the rate of autism in children ages 3 to 17 is now 1 in 91 children. This is a dramatic increase of from the 1 in 150 rate that was reported last year and the 1 in 250 rate that was reported 3 years ago. If this report is accurate, I think as a district we have to be proactive to look, do we have long-term plans to increase this population in our school district? I am not saying that anything that the district is doing today is wrong, and I'm not up here bashing what the special needs program does. Andrea and her team do a great job. But if this population is increasing by potentially 20%, do we have the facilities for these kids? Do we have the financial support for these children? And do we have the infrastructure in place to increase it by that much? Thank you very much.
Good evening, Elise Epner, Pequot Road. It takes a village to find a good superintendent these days, and I want to thank the board for including and encouraging members of this community to meet with the search associates in the last few days. But I would respectfully request that the inclusion of our community in this process not end tonight. I would urge you as the board to put your good heads together to come up with a process so that the more of the community could be represented at the table throughout the rest of the process, not just in meeting the final candidate that's been brought forward. I would ask you to consider allowing representatives, whether it be of the PTA or other parent groups or maybe taxpayers, to be part of the process. Yes, I do understand the need for confidentiality throughout the process to ensure that good candidates feel comfortable bringing their names to our town. I think that if we put our good heads together, we can find some members of our community who are willing to abide by the strictest rules of confidentiality to be part of the process. There are at least two benefits from including more people in the process. Most simply, we'd be able to hear different viewpoints, and I guess if aphorisms are the theme of the night, the more the merrier. Second of all, I think also that we'd be able to get the buy-in of more of the perhaps disgruntled or other members of the town or community who may be feeling a little alienated from the process or from other parts of the school district at this time. So of course, I understand that there's that too many cooks would spoil the pot, but I would think that if we put our good heads together, we could find some process to include some additional members in this most important process.
Justin signaled that the time is up.
Thank you very much for that signal. I appreciate that.
Are there any other members of the public wishing to address the board at this time? Seeing none, we will move on to our next item. We have, under extraordinary business, we have appointment of hearing officer. I have a recommended motion that the Board of Education allow the superintendent to appoint a hearing officer at her discretion to hear and decide residency hearings and/or expulsion hearings in a case-by-case basis, moved by Mr. Weber and seconded by Mrs. Hahn. I will turn that over to Dr. Clark so she can explain the purpose of this motion.
Thank you. This has been an extraordinary year based on the number of expulsion hearings that we need to schedule. Everyone has very busy schedules. We have a timeline we need to follow for state mandate in terms of how many days after a suspension we need to have the expulsion hearing. I would like to be able to hire a hearing officer when we can't get a committee of 3 board members to attend the hearing. And it would only be under those circumstances. We almost had that circumstance yesterday, and without a vote, we wouldn't have been able to go ahead with a hearing with everyone present, ready to have the hearing. So if you could pass this, and we would have it on file and use it only when we need to. Thank you.
I would just like to add, so that people don't misunderstand, we have had a substantially increased number of expulsion hearings this year that have not necessarily had to do with things taking place in our schools, but things taking place within the community that require the superintendent to take this action. So I don't want people to think that the administrators in our schools are not on top of what goes on in the schools, and because we have actually had very good success with what's going on in our schools, but we have found ourselves having to deal with problems that could affect our schools because of things that are going on outside, and that's why we've been seeing the increased activity. So are there any other questions from board members? Ms. Dodson?
Thank you.
It's Helen. Oh, sorry, Helen.
I'm just a little confused as to why this is here, because I thought you always had at least the implicit authority. I mean, there were times over the
Board
past...
has to vote. Board has to vote
No,
on
but there
it.
were times over the past few years where you had to schedule a hearing and couldn't, and the board said, when you pulled the board, I mean, recently,
The board
said,
pulled
"Go
the
ahead,
board,
hire."
it has to be a vote.
We
Okay.
checked with our attorneys,
Okay.
and we have to have
Okay.
an action on
Okay.
this.
Okay, I guess I just wonder whether the board would want kind of the right of first refusal on expulsion hearing.
I am only going to do this when I can't get 3 board members.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Alexander, or Pam, sorry.
Actually, I agree with Ms. Dotson. Maybe you could wordsmith some kind of amendment so that rather than discretion, it said only if 3 board members cannot attend the meeting, or I don't know if the board's open.
This is the wording we got from the attorney,
So this is what
and
they
that's
want
why
to
they
read.
said on a case by case, but we can state in the record that this is only when we can't get 3 board members.
Could that word be added?
Would you would like to?
Offer an amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to amend this to add at the end of, as after the words case-by-case basis, no, I'm sorry, and decide residency hearings and/or expulsion hearings when the
When 3, but at least 3 board members would not be available. And I just,
need this publication in.
I'm sorry to belabor this,
When at least 3
what
board
that
members
means,
are not available.
that means if 3 people say they're going to be there, they have to be there.
Yeah.
You see, life happens, and so we've had situations where 3 people said they would be there, and then they were not able to. And you can't call a hearing officer at the time this hearing was supposed to be scheduled. So there has to be a commitment when 3 people say we'll be there. They've got to be there.
The
So
situation,
if we amend this, is this gonna make your life more difficult? Because, I mean, I'll withdraw it if it's gonna make your life.
In a
more
way it will, because I would like to be able to say to people, are you absolutely committing yourself to be there at this time? And if we get 3, great. If we get 5 or 9, fantastic. But if it sounds like it's gonna be almost impossible to get 3, I'd rather hire a hearing officer.
Mrs. On.
But I don't see how that changes what we do now. I mean,
yes, you would go ahead with the expulsion. So I don't see how adding this language is gonna hurt what we currently do now.
The difficulty we do face and did face recently was we had an expulsion scheduled, hearing scheduled, and we had 3 members who were supposed to attend, but the morning of the expulsion hearing, 3 members weren't there. And at that point, Dr. Clark can't, she's already into the calendar to comply with the schedule that she must meet, and you can't call the hearing officer at that moment.
Right, but
And we were lucky when that happened recently that actually a 3rd board member who wasn't supposed to be there coincidentally was in central office, and we were able to do something, which we needed to do because weren't we well over the timeline?
I think, as long as it's understood that, what I would like to be able to do, if 3 people have said they'll be here, let's say Friday morning, and then they can't, what I would like to be able to do then is just set up for a hearing officer to come in on Monday. So that, I mean, we wouldn't be able to do it that day, but rather than go back to the board and say, okay, couldn't do it Friday, who could do it Monday? So as long as people understand.
So, Ms. Dodson, is your amendments, are you still offering your amendments?
Well, yeah, yes. So it would read that the Board of Education allow the superintendent to appoint a hearing officer at her discretion to hear and decide residency hearings and/or expulsion hearings when at least 3 board members are not available.
Is there a second to the amendment? Mrs. Iacono or Pamela? Sorry, old habits die hard. I'm used to.
Only my mom calls me Pamela when I'm in trouble.
Okay, so you've seconded it. Did you want the floor as well?
No. I was just gonna say
Okay.
second.
Are there any comments or questions from members of the board on the amendment? Seeing none, before the board votes on the amendment, are there any members of the public that would like to address the amendment and the amendment only? Please come forward stating your name and address for the record.
Jim Lee, I was listening to the discussion, and my advice to you is that the motion already provides that that this would be in the superintendent's discretion. If you don't trust the superintendent's discretion, you've got other problems.
Are there any other members of the public that wish to address the item? Seeing none, are there any final comments from the board members before we vote on the amendment? Mrs. On.
Yes, thank you. Since that privilege could be misinterpreted or abused, I prefer this language in there. Thank you.
Mrs. Kopchak.
Can you read the amendment again?
You can read the full motion.
Yeah, the amendment.
With the amendment in it.
Motion reads that the Board of Education allow the superintendent to appoint a hearing officer at her discretion to hear and decide residency hearings and/or expulsion hearings when at least 3 board members are not available.
Is that fine, Mrs. Kopchak? Okay. Further comments from the board? If not, are board all in favor of the amendment? And opposed? Voting in favor are Mrs. Iacono, Mrs. Kupchak, Mr. Mitola, Mrs. Albin, Mrs. On, Ms. Dodson, Mrs. Dow, Mrs. Brandt, and in opposition, Mr. Weber, and no abstentions. Back to the main motion. Are there comments on the main motion from anyone on the board? Mrs. Kupchak.
I just want to go on the record as saying, originally when the board had this discussion about hearing officers, I was for it, and then a member of the public had made a comment that changed my mind, that we may not look to people who are coming before the administration in a situation objective because we have a hearing officer, which made me think that we shouldn't have a hearing officer, and I was originally against having a hearing officer. However, I do like this, though, because of the frequency in which the board has been called upon to attend expulsion hearings this year alone, to the point where we were scheduling during work hours when people are not in town to attend, and the necessity of having them within a certain amount of time. So I would just like to cautionarily say that I hope that we only use them in those very rare cases, because I do think it's important, and it's not a power thing about the board, it's more that the public or anybody coming before us in this situation feels they're getting a fair shake. And it's not like the administration is sort of all making the decision, but rather that individuals, elected individuals, are listening to them and they are getting a fair shake in these areas.
Further comments from members of the board on the main motion? I would just say that Mrs. Kupchak, I remember hearing the comments. A fellow board member, I think, spoke very appropriately to the point, which was why I felt that it was important for the board to hear these cases, that these are members of the school district and members of the community, and coming before the board, it's a responsibility that we have as a board member to deal with these difficult things, as well as, you know, nice moments such as books going to schools as well. And I remember when we had that very discussion you're referring to, and I remembered those words from that former board member, which made me feel that it was important to still do this. And I would agree with you that in the case where there are scheduling conflicts, it is helpful to be able to have a hearing officer. And unfortunately, lately, we have had difficulty with scheduling conflicts because there's been some frequency of these hearings. Then I think when it's necessary for the hearing officer, but as a rule, I think the board should do their best to hear these cases. So if there's nothing further, we can vote on the motion. I apologize, that was the amendment. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the main motion?
Jim Lee again. Besides that particular amendment, I had two other comments on the motion. One is the verb. If I had been writing the motion, I would have used authorize rather than allow. But the major comment is to echo what the chairman just said, which is that the verbs for the hearing officer to hear and decide, there are, as I remember, 3 different ways to decide expulsion and residency cases, some of which involve board ownership of the decision directly, getting your hands dirty, being at the hearing. Some involve the board adopting the report of a hearing officer, which solves your scheduling problem. You know, it's heard during the day, the report is presented during an evening session, you adopt or you don't adopt, you still own it. And the third is where the hearing officer makes the final decision, and the parent or student or whoever's next recourse is not in Fairfield at all. I think it's important for you to at least specify which of those 2 it is. Whether it's a hearing officer who decides your next stop is Hartford, or whether it's a hearing officer who recommends and the board adopts the report. I would recommend that change.
Are there other members of the public wishing to address the main motion? Seeing none, I will return to the board at this point in time. And I would say that, Mr. Mottola?
Mr. Lee makes a very good point, and I just want to make sure it's this board's understanding that if in fact 3 members can't be made available, that this hearing officer will be deciding the expulsion matter. So I'm okay with that, but we need to make sure that all of us understand that. I do remember in my 4 years that we've had a situation that you said where a hearing officer made recommendations that we ended up adopting or not adopting. So I think it's okay the way it is. I think the language means that the hearing officer is going to be deciding the issue at hand, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page with respect to that.
I would continue and agree with what you just said, Mr. Mottola. I think the board needs to be certain that they understand that they're turning over the authority to the hearing officer to make the decision for the board. Or the board could decide that they want the hearing officer to conduct the hearing with their recommendation that comes to the board at a public meeting, that then the board would make a final decision on.
If I could just correct, it would have to be an executive session to protect the identity of the student.
In discussions with the attorneys yesterday, that's what was explained. We would not be discussing the student. You would get the decision from the hearing officer and you would adopt it or you would not. And in light of that, I would entertain a motion. I think we're on the right track in doing something here. I would entertain a motion to postpone this to a date certain so that there could be more work done with this. Unless you have something that's very urgent.
Please, I would ask that it not be postponed because I have other hearings that need to be scheduled and I know we're coming into a really busy time of the year. And if this doesn't work for people, you could change it. I will always try and get board members first, especially for residency hearings. However, I know of an impending situation where it's really important that we be able to have the expulsion. And if board members aren't available, I would like to be able to have a hearing officer.
Ms. Diacono?
I would just like to say that I'm totally fine with the motion now that it's amended. Obviously, we've gotten to this point because we're not available to do it. We're gonna have to leave it up to the discretion of a hearing officer, and if we can't be here, then we're gonna have to live with that. If you wanna be a part of it, then change your schedule and you're gonna have to attend the residency hearing or the expulsion hearing when it's requested.
And if I'd like to point out to everyone that the hearing officer is usually an attorney appointed jointly by the attorney representing the administration and the attorney representing the family. So it is objective. There's agreement as to who would be asked to be the hearing officer. It's not someone that we call.
This is basically like the last case scenario. So
Right.
I'm comfortable because the board is essentially going to try and do this to the best of its ability. And if we can't do it to the best of our ability, that this will happen so that we can move the process along legally.
Right.
So I'm comfortable with this as the way it is right now.
Any further comments? Okay, we have heard from the public, so I will take a vote on the motion. All in favor of the main motion? And all opposed? Voting in favor are Mrs. Iacono, Mrs. Kupchak, Mr. Mottola, Mrs. Alvin, Mrs. Zahn, Ms. Dodson, Mrs. Dow, and Mrs. Brand. In opposition is Mr. Weber, and there are no abstentions. Moving on to our next item, we have presentations, and we have presentation of the music curriculum, grades 6 through 8. I will turn that over to Dr. Clark.
Mrs. Schmardell is here, and I'm hoping that she and Dr. Rosado will also introduce members of the music department who are here. And As you know, this is a presentation of the music curriculum level 6 through 8, and it's, I think, very fitting for our last 3 board members that they get to enjoy something so important. Thank you. And Mr. Matilla and Mrs. On and Mrs. Alvin, I'm sorry, with me.
And Helen, this one's for you. Music curriculum.
Is there music in the presentation?
There is.
Let me show you the introductions first, then let me introduce, so you can see.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here to share with you the product of the last 2 years of curriculum work. We're actually bringing forward the revision of 12 middle school documents and new curriculum for 4 high school classes. And I can tell you that I'm very proud of the work done by the music teachers in this district. They approach this task with the utmost seriousness and understand the full impact of a well-designed and well-informed curriculum. Many of the team is here this evening, and I would like to take a moment to introduce them, and I would ask the teachers to please stand. In that corner, I saw Loretta Lazaris, and Holly Torrance, and George Croce, Scott Rogers, Roger Bryan, Faith Berry, Mendy Mazensky, Sarah Mastroni, Cheryl Lebrecht, Mike Varga, Kevin Cottelease, Jeremy Fiftel, Sam Eckhart, and Scott Marsland is here to support our efforts as well. Did I miss anybody? Every year we have a townwide festival. Last year it was the townwide orchestra festival, which unites our district. All of our elementary schools come together and play. All of our middle schools come together and play, and our 2 high schools come together and perform. The first bit that you're going to see in this presentation is footage from last year's orchestra festival. And it's a representation of our string curriculum, grade 5 through 12 and beyond. And the beyond part is important, and I'll explain more about that in a second. Okay, so the first group that you're going to see is the combined 5th grade orchestra. There are 225 5th graders playing in this segment. The next segment is going to be the combined 8th grade orchestra. The next section is going to be the combined symphonic orchestra, which are the 11th and 12th graders from both high schools, and they are joined by wind ensemble members from both high schools as well. There's a guest conductor for this ensemble, and you'll see him in this piece and in the next segment. conducting is a conductor who's conducted all over the United States and throughout Europe. And the beyond part of what I said before is the fact that he's a Fairfield graduate, and we are proud to call him our own. His name is Chris Heisey, and he'll be conducting the next group, which is the Combined Chamber Orchestra, which is the only audition group at the high school level. And again, this is both high schools chamber orchestra combined, conducted by Chris Heisey. The next group that you're going to hear is string faculty here in Fairfield. And the string faculty for the past two orchestra festivals has performed together to not only show that on a day-to-day basis, all of our teachers model what we want our students to do, but in a larger setting as an ensemble. They're modeling here for them as well. And the students we found really enjoy seeing all of their teachers performing. So this is our string faculty. I'd like to add the tall blonde woman in the middle is also a Fairfield graduate. And the last group is going to be all 500 students playing together. Thank you. So that's an overview of one strand of our curriculum. So, and it takes you from pretty much in the beginning all the way through to the end. So then the question is, how do you get there? And the first part of the answer is the staff. It's a highly skilled staff that has put a lot of work writing thoughtful curriculum and carefully delivered curriculum. The other piece, the other answer to that question is the curriculum itself. Our curriculum is standards-based and sequential. It starts in kindergarten with a strong foundation in general music, And then as elementary school continues into fourth grade, there's orchestra option for fourth grade. They can choose it if they like. In fifth grade, all students sing in chorus, and they can then choose band or stay in orchestra. In sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, while music is a required subject, the students then get to choose whether they're going to take music technology, chorus, band, or orchestra. And then in high school, the music courses are completely elective. So at the high school level, these are the final 4 curriculum documents that have just been completed and are being presented to you for approval, and they complete the overall high school program studies for the music department. In the middle school, music is offered in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in all 4 of these strands. It meets 3 times a week for the entire year, and the performing ensembles, which are band, chorus, and orchestra, the curriculum design is very similar in that it focuses on skill levels, repertoire maps, and ensemble skill development. One of the state standards addressed in our curriculum is the vocal standard, where students are required to sing alone and with others accurately, with good breath control, with expression and technical accuracy, and music representing diverse genres and cultures. In the instrumental standard, similar to the vocal standard, students are required to play alone and with others a varied repertoire of instrumental music in large and small ensembles with expression and technical accuracy. In all strands, notation is something that is addressed, and here is just a representation of the music technology class where students are working on note reading, reading and notating skills. Analysis is another one of the state standards that we're addressing, where students listen to and describe and analyze music. And evaluation. Students evaluate music and music performance. They evaluate the quality and effectiveness of their own and other performances and offer constructive suggestions for improvement. History and culture is another standard where students will understand music in relation to history and culture. And this is the Memorial Day Parade, so this is our culture and our history. Now, as a sample, we're going to look a little bit closer at the 7th grade orchestra, just as a representation. In addition to the standards that are state and national standards addressed in our program, we also have local, our own goals and expectations for our individual classes. And I'm going to move ahead with that. One of the goals is ensemble goals. And it's embedded in the curriculum. So for 7th grade orchestra, here's one of our local goals that relates to the full ensemble. And another one. In the instrumental ensembles, the music curriculum includes small group lesson goals in addition to the large ensemble goals. And this is where from within a larger ensemble we can approach differentiation of instruction and help students as they progress with their own individual skills. And in each strand and in each ensemble, there are designated skill objectives that the students work to achieve, and those are all spelled out, so we know this happens to be the orchestra skill level 3, so when students meet all of these criteria, then we know they've reached that objective and that goal, and they're then moving on to skill level 4. Each of our strands has a repertoire map. This is again the orchestra repertoire map, and this ensures certain experiences, certain styles of music are experienced across the district within each grade, and there was a lot of discussion in each strand and at each grade level about what pieces are what styles I should say, or genres are most appropriate for those grades. And then based on literature that we have and that we know is good quality literature, this map was developed, and as I said, there's one for chorus and one for band as well. There are a number of enrichment opportunities, or as we often call them, extension experiences, which are available to students who qualify. And these opportunities are available at the building level, at the district level, and at a regional level. And this picture shows a student preparing an audition piece and being helped by the teacher for the Fairfield County Springs Festival. Voice class is a high school elective, and one of the documents being brought forward tonight. The focus of this class is to develop the solo singer. Now, this photograph was taken the day before Halloween, which explains the costumes. And what you're seeing here is students working on good vowel shaping. And in this class, students will study individual vocal techniques, repertoire for the solo singer, sight reading, keyboard for vocalists, and music technology for vocalists. In the bigger picture, the greater benefits of music education, as identified by Music Educators National Conference. These are just some of the benefits of music education in a school setting. Other benefits include links to lower dropout rates, fewer instances of substance abuse, and a greater sense of belonging. While leading a healthy, happy, and successful life depends on both hemispheres of the brain working as an integrated whole. The past is weighed most heavily on the processes of the left hemisphere, which is sequential, specializes in text, analyzes details, and focuses on the functional. But the future will weigh more heavily on the processes of the right hemisphere, which is simultaneous, specializes in context, synthesizes the big picture, and is aesthetic. And music works very heavily in the right hemisphere of the brain. And transferable skills, when we look at these skills, we might not think these are things that are being taught in music classes, but they are being taught every. Oh, that should be done. These are skills that are being taught and addressed in every class, every day, every period, all school year long. The ones in yellow have been identified as 21st century skills and are regarded as must-haves to be successful in the new millennium. Thank you.
Questions or comments from board members on the presentation? Mr. Weber and then Ms. Dodson.
Have we ever thought of putting that presentation, the first that you did on the website? And I think it would be terrific for people to see. Wonderful idea, especially as we move into budget season.
It was sent to their
Because people don't see that, seriously. They really don't see what, we're producing in town. They're just thinking the way they went to school with chalkboards and, apples and recess and all that. We should make people
that the entire kind of like orchestra festival footage was sent to Fair TV. I don't live in town. I don't know if it ever made it on there. I have been asking my staff. No one saw it, but it was sent. It was submitted.
No, so, we have control over our website. I think it's cool.
If board members would like to wait until you've approved this curriculum, we could put it on, or if you believe that it's going to be approved at the next meeting, I think it would be great to get it on the website as soon as possible. Is that okay with people? Thank you. Thank you. Hal?
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much for the excerpts of the concert. I was there that night, and it was just phenomenal. I mean, the elementary school kids were better than I've ever heard elementary school kids play, and the middle school and the 8th graders, and then the high school is just phenomenal. And of course, the faculty they're all pros, and some of you are here tonight. It was just such a joy to listen to that concert, and Can at the end was. I remember being in there and listening to it and thinking, oh my God, it's about to go off the rails. And I remember the conductor doing this before he started, because he had 500 kids playing Can, and it never went off the rails. It was just gorgeous. I had so much respect. And you also be talking about it, but I just had so much respect and admiration for our music teachers and administrators, not just because of what they do for the kids, which is a lot, but for the gift that they give to the town with every concert, whether it's 5th grade or high school. It's a complete gift to the town. And I will say what I said before. I think everybody should go to a concert and see what your tax dollars pay for, because it's just magnificent. I thank you, Donna, for shepherding the department. I thank everybody who's here from the music department. Hi, Jeremy. Hi, everybody. Hi, Mike Varga. This is my last meeting. I'm going off the rails here. I actually have one question, which is, and has nothing to do with the middle school curriculum. Why don't we start music earlier in the elementary schools? I've always wondered about music and world languages. That's another conversation. Why do we wait until the late elementary years? And I know you're not the elementary school music coordinator, you're secondary, but
No.
oh, you're K through 12. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I would really push the district to start. Well, I'll leave world languages out. That really is another conversation. But I would push the district to start music earlier.
Some districts do. Some
I know
districts
they
start,
do, yeah.
the strings in 3rd grade and band in 4th grade.
Mhm.
And it's just that much more exposure, that much more experience.
Mhm.
I think that would be a wonderful thing to do.
And I would think with the vocals, you could start even earlier.
Well, in the curriculum, students are singing from kindergarten. A formal choral experience as a full chorus doesn't happen until 5th grade, but they are singing from kindergarten.
I mean, especially after seeing the list of all the areas, the crossover areas where music influences learning and math and language arts. I would love to hear other people's opinions on it, but I would really endorse that. Thank you for a marvelous experience on a personal note. Thank you for a marvelous experience for both of my children going
Thank
through
you.
the school district and music program.
And thank you. We've enjoyed working with you.
Further questions or comments? Pam?
I'm used to the first name.
I'm trying.
I just want to echo what Helen said, and unfortunately, what I think it comes down to is money and space. Something that we don't have a lot of, but I certainly would love to champion being able to do something at a younger age. And I actually had written down here a website, so David was thinking the same thing that I was. This is something that we do really, really well, and we need to promote it. And if we want to get money and space to do these kinds of things, we need to show what we're doing, and this is definitely a great way to do it. So please, I would love to see this go on the website. And then we would love some money and space to do this, Brenda.
You haven't been sworn in at the RTM and you're being lobbied. Sue Brand.
This is wonderful. I absolutely love this. But I think also besides the performance, which is sort of the icing, I think what impressed me so much is there's so much depth to this. There are so many life skills that I think are taught that the students take when they leave here. The presence, standing in front of people, what you teach in vocal, how you communicate with people, with expression. It crosses many disciplines, and you're even talking about the palette, and that's something that I know is very important in foreign language. There's just so many pieces to this that I can't honestly tell you how vital I think it is to our curriculum as a whole. It really is wonderful, and thank you.
I would just like to thank all of the music educators who are here tonight. I think it's probably the only night in the year when all of you are gathered in one place and not rehearsing with students. And I just want to acknowledge how hard all of you work. Thank you.
Thank you. I was impressed with the presentation, but knowing the music curriculum that we have in Fairfield, it's among all of our hallmarks. I mean, we often sometimes say Fairfield does this great and Fairfield does that great, and it's nice to know we do a lot of things exceptionally well, the music being one of them. And from elementary school on through all the opportunities that there are to students in the high school level, the skills that they learn in echoing Helen's comments. There are so many things that our students learn, and some people look at the arts as an extra and as fluff. But Helen has said it earlier tonight, it is curriculum. And the science is there to show that when you are learning something here, you can use it there. And music is an amazing tool. And I learned a long time ago that music and math just go hand in hand. And what students can learn to do in math from music. And there's just so many ways that a music curriculum really helps the student. It also makes our students more rounded and exposing them to other things. So you do great work. Thank you for this presentation, and I know it will be a pleasure to approve this curriculum. And I do thank all the music staff that's out here tonight. Familiar faces, some, but you're all familiar in some ways. And I've always thought that the best free event in town was a concert at our high schools. It's great entertainment, and it's free in that you don't have to pay a ticket price. Tax dollars have paid for it, but it's well worth it, and anyone in the community who hasn't been to a concert should go to one. So unless there's anything else, our music staff, if they would like, they can go home for the night and you know, turn the car radio on when you get in it, and we'll move on to our next item. We will try and step up the pace as I'm watching you spend a little extra time on some things.
By state law, we must present to you the strategic school profile report the first meeting in November after we have received them. And fortunately for us, we received them quite recently. They're very extensive documents. I too am looking at the time. Mr. Seltzer and Dr. Rosado have a presentation for you. We'll go through it very quickly so that we can meet the guidelines of the law. Most of you are very familiar with these documents and know where to find the information, so I'll turn it right over to them. Dr. Rosado? We do need to move, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. As Ann mentioned, this is a state law. It is a snapshot of our school district. Each school district in Connecticut has a strategic school profile. Every November, we present to you our profile, and really it's designed to give the community information about our resources, our faculties, our achievement scores, and it's been a wonderful tool over time to sort of focus us in on an overall report card, if you will, of our district. As you can see from the slide, it's an overview of student and staff demographics, enrollment and resources, and student performance on standardized assessments. This first slide details student enrollment for the last number of years. And you can see last year's enrollment was 9,953. The changes, it continues to rise. The asterisk at the bottom shows you as of November 2nd, our current enrollment is 10,034 students.
student demographic data for students eligible for free and reduced lunch, it went up approximately 2%. Students who are not fluent in English, our ALL population remains basically the same, a slight increase. Encouraging news is that 97% of students attended preschool or nursery school, and those identified talented and gifted in special education remain steady at the percentage from last year. For juniors and seniors working, it decreased approximately 6%, so that means less students are working after school, focusing on their schoolwork hopefully. Seniors pursuing higher education decreased by 2%, and seniors employed in the military decreased by a little over 2.5%. For race and ethnicity, our population of minority students is slightly increased from last year. The number of special ed and general teachers, as you can see, increased approximately 17 teachers, goes along with enrollment. And teachers with master's degrees or higher, this continues to rise. You can see for students per computer, we are slightly less than the DIRT, but it's broken down by how much you know history. For class size, for grades K, 2, and 7, we are slightly higher than high school, 5th grade, we're about even with the state. In high school, we're slightly higher average. As compared to the DIRT, schools that are comparable to us, you can see that for K, 2nd, and high school, we're slightly higher, and for 5th and 7th, we're slightly lower.
This chart details the physical fitness test. There are 4 parts to the test, and we're very proud of our phys ed program, as we are all of our special areas. But you can see that in the last number of years, we've had a nice steady increase of percentage of students passing all 4 parts of the phys ed test. Here you see grades 3, 4, and 5 as compared to 2008 to 2009. Connecticut Mastery Test scores, relatively similar to what we've seen in the last couple of years. Nice strong scores. When you go over toward the 5th grade, you see really nice percentages of students achieving the state goal. Grades 6, 7, and 8. These are the scores compared to last year for reading, writing, math, and science. On our CAPT scores, you can see Fairfield in the red as compared to the state for 2008, and then again in 2009, reading, writing, math, and science. We are looking here at the science in particular. We want to take a hard look in terms of, Mrs. Jill and I have been looking and working with the science teachers at the high school level to take a look at the CAPT and then up against the curriculum to make sure that we are, in fact, making sure that we're preparing kids well for that assessment. Our belief is that that's a 1-year anomaly. Of course, we'll be certainly looking at next year to see how that plays itself out. And here are SAT scores, class of 2007 versus the class of 2008 up against the state. Saw a nice increase in our math average score, in our critical reading average score, and the writing saw a nice jump as well. Those are the highlights of the strategic school profile. There are some, more information in the book, and certainly welcome any questions that you might have. I was trying to run through that relatively quickly because I know we're pressed for time this evening. Thank you.
questions? I'll start with Mrs. Zahn and Helen.
Thank you. See, I don't have a first name.
I'm sorry.
Just under the Connecticut Mastery Test page, is that a typo? It should say writing, writing, not writing, reading. The Connecticut Mastery
Yes,
Test
yes,
percentage
writing,
reading
writing.
staple.
Yes, right.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Helen?
Thank you. I apologize because the numbers were passing so quickly. Could I ask you to repeat the information, the comparison on the math scores, particularly in middle school, only because I know there's been a weakness there in past years, 8th grade math. I mean, the number looks strong, 83.6, but I'm sorry, I'm talking about the CMT's page 3. How does that compare to the previous year?
In 6th grade for math, we saw a very slight increase,
Okay.
of 0.4% of kids making goal. In grade 7, we saw about a 3.5% increase of kids making goal. And in grade 8, we saw a 0.6 decrease approximately. So I mean, relatively the same as the previous year.
Yeah.
And it's about 84%.
I'm wondering what it is about 8th grade math, because we've had this problem year after year. And I mean, it's still a very strong number, but it's, I know there was an attempt, Jack, a few years ago to go back through the middle school and elementary school curricula and math to kind of trace what was happening that was resulting in this weakness, and I forget if it was boys and girls or one or the other, but
I guess looking across the 3 grades, they're all around the 85 percentile at goal, which is a very strong score. And actually, it has been increasing over the last number of years.
the last couple of years. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I don't have any other specific questions about this. I do notice that, gee, on page 5, we still only have 931 instructional hours in the high school. Allow that to be my...
Continues to be an issue.
Yeah, it does continue to be an issue, and I hope it will be an absolute budget priority this year to get those extra instructional hours. I know that the faculty of the high schools approved the one particular schedule change, and I just hope and pray that we can get those extra hours in, because it really stands out compared to the state averages.
Brendan?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the seniors pursuing higher education. Do we include also technical schools in that percentage?
Yes, we do, yes.
And I mean, I know it's not a huge percentage drop, and it might, in fact, be due to economics that students might be putting off. Do you think that's why that number's down 2%?
Yeah, actually that, and also juniors and seniors working, we were surmising that perhaps with the economy being the way that it was, that actually went down. It hasn't gone down in recent years.
Well, maybe they couldn't find a job.
That's what we were thinking.
Right.
That's what we were thinking about that.
Very interesting.
Mr. Webb?
I just have a quick question about the science test. 08 was the first year that they administered science, and it went down the next year.
Yes.
I mean, logically, how could that happen? First year you administer a test. I mean, was it changed in any significant way?
No, and actually we think it was a 1-year anomaly with that.
Okay.
They did not change the 10th grade science test at all.
Yeah, because if it's the first year, no one's ever taken it before, you would think the score's gonna be lower and it'll go up. Yeah. But you're looking into it, I'm sure you can find it.
We are.
Thank you.
Pam?
Speaking of science, a while ago we voted on the science curriculum, and I know there were questions about whether or not we should add a chemistry component in the high school. And I think that was the vote policy. We really haven't heard anything back on any of that. Can we get an give the board an update as to what you are looking into, because if it's not an anomaly, some of the things that you and Patrice are looking at, maybe giving a report at the board table at some point soon, specifically on science. Thank you.
Sue Brand?
This document actually is enormous. There's a tremendous amount of information here, and I also think a lot that can be garnered from this. So what I would like to see is if we can have some sense of what changes you feel need to be implemented for the next year. Say, if it's reasonable, we can have a conversation with the board in December, if not at the latest, because we will be starting our budget. Because I think the purpose of this is to take a look at where we are, and then also think about what changes would be important to plan for. I'm still wading through this, so to be honest, I would like to see this come up again, and I'd like to, gain some weight. Thank you.
On November 24th, as part of a budget discussion, you're absolutely right. There are 3 areas we're going to ask the board to talk about, and they're all reflected in the strategic school profile. One is racial imbalance, one is the number of students in Osborne Hill, and the third is the high school schedule. And we'll be asking the board to give us direction. Do you want us to address those items as we move into the budget? And I think it might be a lengthy discussion, but we have to get direction from you before we go down any of those roads. And that's just a piece of it. You're right, there's a lot in here. But those are, in our minds, those are the big 3.
If there are no other questions on the strategic school profile, I will move on. If you have further questions, feel free to email them to or call Dr. Clark's office, and she will get them to the appropriate people. Moving on, we have approval of revision of the graduation requirement for social studies at the high school. I have a recommended motion that the Board of Education approve revision of the graduation requirement for social studies at the high school from 3 years to 3.5 years, beginning with the class of 2014. Moved by Mrs. Zahn, seconded by Ms. Dodson.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce Mr. Burt and Dr. Rosato in a minute. We're very excited about this. And this board has always been interested in raising the bar, taking a look at what it is we expect all of our students to know and be able to do. This proposal comes before you through Mr. Burt, but from the Social Studies Department, and I would like to turn this over to him. This is something I'm hoping you'll be able to support.
All right, good evening. I'm very excited to bring this proposal forward. We have full support from the entire high school department, as well as the joint leadership team, as well as central office. I don't know how much you want me to go in depth. I know this was in your Friday packet. If you want me to quickly go over the structure here, some of the major changes.
To start, could I just ask a question? You made the frame of reference on this. What does the state require with respect to some of the social studies?
There's 2 requirements in terms of courses. One is a civics course at some point during the high school career, as well as a U.S. history course.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You can see from the first column there we have currently a 3-year process, a 3-year requirement. The freshman year, all students take 1 semester of civics, and they take 1 semester of highlights of Western civilization, which truly is a highlights course. The phrase we like to use, they go from Plato to NATO in 4 months. And our teachers do an excellent job with this, but I'm not so sure, and the department's not sure that this is the best way to handle history. In 10th grade, they do a full year of modern global studies. Typically, it's 19th and 20th century in 4 regions. And in 11th grade, they have the full year of U.S. history. In 12th grade, the option of 10 electives in the social studies department. What we're proposing is what we feel is a much more logical sequence and one that best serves the needs of our students. The 9th and 10th grade would be essentially 1 course. It's global studies, essentially ancient times to modern times. And I gave the date of 1500 just as a rough reference. The teachers and I are still discussing where that drop-off date would be between the 2 courses. But what we're looking at is a thematic approach, and we are going to embed most of the concepts from the highlights course into that, as well as the concepts of modern global studies into that course. Having taught both of these courses myself at Darien High School and just speaking with teachers here in Fairfield, we realized that if we go through, for instance, the study of China in 10th grade, it's difficult to talk about the history of China without talking about its interaction with Britain. So what we're doing, and then we go into, say, India, the next marking period would be the same thing. We're talking about India's history and the interaction with Britain. So it just makes sense as we go through history that we try to draw context and concepts for students that just makes sense. And then one of the things I do want to kind of change here is 11th and 12th grade. We are saying in this third column here, the first one semester of civics in 12th grade, one of the things we're considering is offering that as a junior or senior choice. It'd still be required, but it would be an option to do it either in 11th grade or 12th grade. And one of the other things is it would not necessarily be the option of 10 electives. One of the things we are considering is taking some of our current electives and being able to fulfill the civics requirement. The state has a very broad guideline when they talk about civics, and there's 4 major areas that we can address. One of them would include, say, international relations. Well, we currently have a course in international relations as an elective course in 12th grade, so we could take components of the civics, combine that into this course, and then allow students to specialize, say, in international relations or contemporary issues. How great would it be if you could do the first marking period in the major aspects of American government and personal law, and then get into contemporary issues of how the health bill is going through the process. You know, and that would be adaptable every year, and teachers would have the freedom to explore those issues that are currently interesting us in American government. You can see down below is our implementation timeline. The idea is that we would like to finish writing the curriculum for both of the 9th and 10th grades this year for implementation for next year's freshman class, which is the class of 2014. And then the civics course would be obviously put in place for the year 2012 or 2013, depending upon whether or not we have that junior year choice. So in the next page, you can see some budget implications. The most significant one of that would be in 2013, or in this case 2012, if we do go with the junior elective, is that we would have an increase of approximately 1 teacher per building. And the interesting thing is, in the Western Civilization course, we already have a global studies textbook. They don't make a highlights of Western Civilization textbook. The only one they do make is at an AP level or a college level. So we actually are using a global studies textbook already for the freshman year. So it's a minimal impact to actually increase that for next year for all freshmen.
Questions? Helen?
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Can I call you Jim? Just for tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think this is excellent. I think the more global studies, international studies we have in our curriculum, the better. But here's my concern. I don't need to tell you this. As kids go from 10th to 11th grade, the funnel gets narrower and narrower, and even more so into 12th grade in terms of the time availability, the period availability for the classes they want to take. By the time kids are in, certainly in 12th grade and probably for most 11th grade, they're not taking too many semester courses. They're taking full year courses, math. They have a math course, a full year science course, a U.S. history junior year. What happens in 12th grade? What happens if they want to take a full year U.S. history in 11th grade and say they want to take modern European history or one of the other AP courses in social studies that would not satisfy the civics requirement? There's just no room in the schedule for an awful lot of these kids, and I don't want to say most because I don't know what the numbers are, but I think it's really hard to fulfill that civics requirement in, certainly in 12th grade, probably in 11th grade as well, for a lot of these kids. There's just no room in the day. Maybe with the new high school schedule, it will be different. I'm hoping it will, but barring that, I mean, is there any way they could do it in 9th grade or 10th grade?
One of the things that we do want to consider is the topics of civics course. and we definitely feel it's more appropriate as they get closer to voting age, as well as some of the more difficult concepts. You know, you're talking about Supreme Court case law. You're talking about Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment rights. These are very difficult concepts, and they're definitely more appropriate in the 12th grade level. Having worked in a system that had a 3.5-year requirement with the civics in the senior year, it actually worked fine. My last year there, we introduced AP Modern European History, which is a full year course, into that course selection, and it was well subscribed that year, and actually the next year it went up to 3 sections. So if students know from their first day as freshmen that this is the program that they're going to have to fulfill, and that they need to specialize, or if they would like to figure out which coursework, they can work that out from the early stage in the freshman year.
Not without a schedule change though, and there just are not enough hours in the day.
Well, actually, I did a study of the senior course requirements at this point. One of the initiatives for the Joint Leadership Team is that we do increase graduation requirements. We found that seniors in general have usually a lighter load than juniors and sophomores and freshmen.
And the Joint Leadership Team, which is the administrators from both schools, really supports this, because many of our seniors, if they've taken 8 courses as freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, do have time within their schedules. And we feel that this is something all of us should have.
And the other thing to consider, if we use some of the other courses we currently have, for instance, Youth and Law, Contemporary Issues, or International Law, Relations, and AP U.S. Government, that would account for up to 45% of our current enrollment in 12th grade. So a number of our students are already enrolled in these courses, so the impact is actually less. If we look forward to the year 2013, there'd be approximately about 100 students per semester that would need to find an additional course. And we're hoping between now and then, the new schedule will possibly come in, and there is a consideration for other content areas that might impact their schedule as well. But looking at some of the population estimates, we are going to go up tremendously between now and then. So there is going to be a need for seats in other courses as well, with more options.
Thank you. This did come before our policy committee, and I raised a lot of the same concerns that Ms. Dodson had. My other concern was, this is one discipline. What happens when the other disciplines ask for an increase in graduation requirements without a schedule change, which is not a done deal? That would kind of be impossible to do. So I just want to caution everybody. I mean, I love this. I will, approve this, but that's something to consider.
And I was asked by Dr. Clark to consider that. The other areas, I did speak to the other curriculum leaders about that potential change in graduation requirements in the other areas. And at this point, there would be no consideration of that until we determine what's going to happen with the new schedule.
Helen?
Does this need to be approved tonight, or could it possibly wait for a broader review of graduation requirements?
We would ask that you approve this tonight. If you do support it, there is a lot of planning that needs to go into place. The other curriculum leaders and Dr. Rosado in central office believe this is the graduation requirement. At this time, we would like to move forward. We don't want this to have to depend upon a change in the schedule in case for some reason we decide not to move forward with that. We support, on a personal note, because of what's happening in the world today, I really believe all of our students would benefit from this. And I would like to give the okay to the department so they get ready for it.
Pam and then John.
Thank you. I will support this tonight. I think we need to do it. I really do. And having been just out doing months of coffees and getting feedback from parents, civics actually was one of the things that came up repeatedly, that we need to work on this for our students. So I'm very happy to move forward with this. And I would also like to thank you for providing the budget implications of this. It's very important. It's a big component, and I will support moving this forward.
So what you're saying is that you you want to go forward with this, even though we're not quite sure what's going to happen with the schedule. You're confident that it's the appropriate thing to do?
Yes.
Okay. I have just, it might sound like a peculiar question. How far do you get in U.S. history? I remember when I was in school, it seemed like we got to World War II, and that was about it. It was June. I know. I've lived through a lot of it. I mean, it seems to me at some point it's going to have to be more than one full year.
Before, if I could cut Mr. Bird off in the past, this is exactly why we're taking a look at this. And one of the things, history can be taught in terms of, you know, the chronological order of things that happened without linking and making sense. And we haven't always asked students to think about the impact of particular events or the British Empire or the role that geography plays on the history of regions. And what our teachers would like to do with this is really tie the big ideas and the important concepts together. And maybe our students will start to learn from history better than we do. Sorry, Mr. Burt. Go ahead.
That is a constant struggle. Having taught the AP US History course myself for a number of years, it was, you know, how far can you get? And after doing that for a number of years, I realized that the content push never really achieves anything. Students don't actually retain any information if you just start with the content. And there's a number of studies that say if you start with content and then try to bring students to those higher levels eventually, oftentimes you never reach the top of that ladder. And so what I'm encouraging teachers to do is consider what are the larger concepts and then transfer the responsible learning over to the students. You know, allow them to engage with material and actually, you know, be forced to defend a position, for instance. And then they're engaged in the information, they're engaged with the content because it makes sense to them. I was a traditional teacher for a number of years, and this is a struggle for me, and I know for a number of teachers in our district, it's a struggle for them as well because it's what we've always done. But it's giving permission to say, you know, what's more important, students walking away with those broader concepts or memorizing the causes of war of 1812? You know, it's a debate happening nationally, and I know where I sit on that particular.
I have our student rep from Ward, Mr. Wolf, Tom Wolf. I'm trying to get the first names down.
I'd like to speak to that. Having taken the American Studies course at Fairfield Ward last year, I noticed because it's an integrated class between both American literature and American history, it was focused more on those broader concepts. And although I'm seeking to become an American Studies major myself, but although I personally believe that those broader concepts are more important in terms of studying history, there were difficulties that arose with regards to the AP exams, where unfortunately, because they're trying to standardize it, content is the only thing that can really regulate. You have your open-ended questions, but even there's a formula that has to be taught and mastered. So, I'm very idealistic when it comes to the things I like to study, but I've always felt that you need more time for American history. It's such a broad, period of time. I don't know how you can speak to that, but that really is a very difficult issue to address.
One of the things we did do, if you recall, we brought forward 3 documents for the middle school last spring, and one of the things we did with the 8th grade is we discovered that in 8th grade, the more modern issues were more relevant to the students' lives at that time in their development. And so one of the answers to your question is that it's always a struggle to get to more modern times. One of the solutions would be it's a 20th century course in 8th grade that really gets into in-depth, and we are moving to get them to modern times to discuss issues that are currently happening.
I have Sarah, Sue Brand, and then Brenda Kupchak.
Going off of what Tom was saying, I took AP US History last year, and you have to teach for the content because with the AP exam,
there's like those open-ended DBQ, FRQ questions that you have to know so much content to score highly on those, and there isn't enough time in the year because the AP exams are held, you know, at the beginning of May, so you have like a month and a half less of school than any other U.S. history course. And I know personally in my class we did from the 60s on 3 days before the AP exam, and there's just not enough time really, like in an AP setting, to do that.
Again, the struggle at that point, you know, having taught AP for 10 years, is to say, you know, relying on students more to cover the content and you cover concepts in class. You know, and I know in the American Studies course at Fairfield Ludlow, they've moved to a thematic approach. One of the difficulties with the American Studies is that the early colonial times, there's not a lot of great literature from the early colonial times. It's actually pretty dry. So they've moved to more thematic approach, which can, again, get those major concepts. And you do, again, I believe if you put things into context, you'll be able to remember them. One of the problems we have with our current situation in terms of exams or testing is that kids tend to memorize things for that day, and then they don't retain them the next day. And so, and I'm trying to remind teachers of this, is that the reason you retain all those details and all those facts is because you teach it. You know, talk to a second-year teacher, they know so much more than they did 12 months ago because they had to teach it. It's the same thing for students. If they have to use it, you will remember it. You know, I'm currently in my 4th year of administration. I'm starting to lose the details, unfortunately, from the wealth of information that they used to obscure facts about American and world history, because I'm not using it on a daily basis. So again, it's a delicate balance, and the AP does require that content piece, but it is something that we have to constantly look at. And I know, speaking with the AP teachers, it is a struggle for them because they love to teach the big concepts, but they know they're hold to the AP course. So it's a constant struggle for them. It's a discussion we have regularly. So I appreciate both of your input. I hope you like those courses, though.
Well, I'd like to speak to that as well. I know I didn't take the U.S. History AP exam. However, just kind of going off my memory, taking the SAT subject test to U.S. History, I scored very highly on it with very little preparation, simply because I had been employing those thoughts and lessons as, you know, I was reading things as I was, you know, considering them. So I think there's truth in what you're saying. However, I don't know necessarily if that approach applies to all students, where, you know, it may work for some students who actively, you know, think about these things outside of the classroom, such as myself, whereas other kids may be, you know, actively involved with, you know, a multitude of things, and, you know, history is just one of, you know, less of a priority, unfortunately. That may not, you know, that may not be as successful for them.
That's why we hire great teachers.
I think there are a few board members who have some questions or comments, and I think we could have a very lengthy discussion on this that goes beyond the motion, actually, because we're talking about so much of the social studies curriculum. So I think if we can try to get through the rest of the board members. Did I see Mrs. Brand and Mrs. Kupchak and then Mr. Matola?
I just was wanting to see if they got through World War II. I didn't know my question.
Mrs. Brand and Mrs. Kupchak, and I have one question.
I'm actually thrilled. This is something I was hoping for because I think I agree, in our day and age, it's really necessary. That said, again, there's so much information and there's so little time. I don't want to look at this piece in isolation relative to other subjects, as well as when we're looking at something for the end, what then have we backed up all the way down the line so that we can accommodate this at the end? There are pieces that we want to see in the middle school, and I know you've worked very hard on the middle school. So what I'm hoping for is that we have this on a continuum, because I'm thinking, as Mr. McCullough is, that maybe now we need to be talking about World War II in 6th grade instead of high school, so that we can be ready. I don't want to do this and look at it as just one segment, it's a whole piece.
Mrs. Kupchak?
my comment was just totally different from any of these. When you're talking about broad-based discussions in social studies, and I found that when my son was in middle school, there was a lot of political things going on at the time, impeachment, let's say, and there was some interesting discussion going on in my son's social studies class at that time. And he came home and shared that with me, and I wasn't very pleased about it, and came back to the school and shared that with who I really respected, a teacher at the school. And just recently, this sort of strange little video was out there that I asked central office if anybody in our social studies department was showing it to any of their classmates, their classes. And it just so happens on their own, a couple were. And what I'm trying to get, and they stopped showing it. What I'm trying to get to is sometimes when and I think it's wonderful to teach objectively because that's how kids learn, especially when it comes to civics. But there's that fine line, and we all know we can't, some of us can't help because we're human beings, injecting our own personal belief in some of these big concept ideas. And I hope that we're careful, that it's reminded to some of our staff that, to keep their opinions out of it and to teach what's happening. To talk about, say, for instance, for example, impeachment as being a process and this is what it is and this is what's happening, and not inject if they like or dislike. And even like you just mentioned, the healthcare debate. I think the healthcare debate is great, don't you? Or it should be this way or it should be that way, instead of just teaching how it works, how it goes through the halls of Congress, and the Senate, the different committees and things like that. I'm just mentioning it because I know that we're in those times where people get very hypersensitive about the way their children's minds are maybe being shaped.
I just have one question. When adding 3.5 years as a graduation requirement and all the discussion we've heard about all the material to teach and not enough time to teach it, we've also talked at prior meetings about conducting a program audit of programs, specifically more at the secondary level. And I will support this motion this evening, but I would ask that at some point we do have information coming back to the board, probably through the policy committee. Thank you. On when we're adding 3.5 years, what we're saying is we're going to become a little more defined in the courses that students are going to take in 4 years of high school, and maybe even more than just a little. So we have a lot of electives out there, and I think we need to evaluate in that list of electives what we keep and what we don't keep. I believe that education moves on the pendulum, and as you move over here and you add more stuff, you have to evaluate what we no longer need. So I would ask that we need to look at those courses that should come out of the program of studies and not be offered, because you're stretching yourselves thin to offer this and get this in with what we have for time to work with. So I would just want to see that happen. If there are no other questions or comments from the board, I will go to the public before we vote on this item. Are there any members of the public wishing to address this item and this item only? Seeing none, I'll come back to the board to vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion? The item passes unanimously. And I will try to move us along because we are running well behind schedule. Our next item is approval of policy. I have a recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy number 3130.1, pandemic epidemic emergencies as revised. Moved by Mrs. Vaughn, seconded by Mrs. Kupchak. Questions or comments from members of the board? Mr. Matola?
I'll be brief because I was the one who raised that issue at the last meeting. I'm perfectly fine with this change language. I think it addresses the concerns that I had a couple of weeks ago. Like that, I'm supporting this.
Mrs. Zahn?
Yes, thank you. I just, everybody should have gotten the email that it was approved by Sam Clary and Kay that went through, and I thank Ms. Brannigan for bringing that up to us. So, shouldn't be a problem approving this policy. Thank you.
Mrs. Iacono?
I just have one question that was raised at the last board meeting, and that had to do with hand washing. Why don't we have anything about hand washing here? I know this came up a little bit, but do you have some more information about that? Why we don't have a line about we will provide time for hand washing? Is that more of an operational thing?
I think that's operational,
Okay.
to tell you the truth.
Okay, so would you mind just providing a little bit of clarity on your thoughts on that? Because I've gotten a lot of inquiries from parents about the hand
Well,
washing.
we keep reminding the administrators to remind the students. We have a lot of signs by sinks. We have the teachers, every classroom has a dispenser of the antibacterial soap, and we just do whatever we can to keep reminding them. And this does relate to the pandemic, and hand washing relates to that, but I would hope, regardless of whether or not there's a threat of flu, that hand washing just becomes a daily practice that people learn. They say it takes 6 weeks to learn good habits, so I hope we're getting there.
Mrs. Zahn?
Thank you. And again, we try and keep our policies general and not specific. Thank you.
Further questions, comments from members of the board? See, Helen?
I'd just like to thank whoever did the rewriting on the infection control with the policy committee.
Oh, so thank you.
Before the board votes on this, are there any members of the public that wish to address this item and this item only? Seeing none, I'll come back to the board. All members in favor of the motion? Item passes unanimously. Moving on, we have adoption of recommendations from the long-range facilities plan for calendar year 2000 or school year 2010-2011. I have a recommended motion that the Board of Education adopt the recommendations from the long-range facilities plan for 2010-2011. Moved by Mrs. Kupchak, seconded by Mr. Weber. Questions or comments from the board, or Dr. Clark, do you have anything first?
This is something that was approved for the long-range plan. It's something we need to have you endorse as we begin the budget process. I would draw your attention to a couple of things. St. Emily's School, we have to pay the lease because this is our alternative high school space, and the program is working. If you have questions about it, we'll be happy to answer, but these students need a home. If you look down the right, maybe it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth item, we had a parent address you tonight talking about new core upgrades to Sherman School. As you can see, that's a capital building project request that would include the issue of the very long lines for the children in the cafeteria. This is something Mr. Cullen anticipated and put into this when he was doing the 5-year plan. You've got the operating budget. So the net total for 2010-2011 would be, this is if we get reimbursements, cost to the town would be $1.2 million. Before the reimbursements would be 1.3. Those are what we're recommending we put in our operating budget. Non-recurring capital budget is the 1.75, and then the capital building project request. And you have approved these in the past. We know about the economy. Mr. Cullen can answer any questions you have, but we need to know what you would like us to do with this.
Mr. Matola and then Mrs. Iacono.
Yeah, I would support this with the caveat, and we discussed this 2 weeks ago. I don't think it should be a big problem to support this. We're going to get into the budget process in January. The administration needs this for planning purposes. Come January, February, we need to make some changes. We can certainly do so. So let's not dwell on this for the next hour and a half. We had a substantial discussion last time. I think we should approve it. The next board that comes in a couple of weeks, talking about the budget, can tweak this as that board sees fit.
Mrs. Iacono.
Respectfully, I disagree. I'm sorry, I'm not going to rush through a document. I'm happy to take this line by line and improve certain things on it, but I'm not comfortable approving the entire document the way it is right now. I'm totally comfortable with the St. Emery's. I am fine with a building request to the first selectman for Riverfield. I'm comfortable with the Osborne Hill piece, the Sherman piece, and the roof. And that's only because we're getting a substantial rebate on that. But in terms of the Dwight bathrooms, that was an issue last year with the RTM. I'm not sure that this is even should be in the operating budget again. I wanted this to go to facilities. I wanted input from the Board of Finance. I have some questions about the Ludlow High School windows, the middle school, the Fairfield Woods Middle School boilers, and whether or not this should be part of the building project request. I'm fine with the central administration lease. I want to know what the preventive maintenance programs are for $500,000. I want to know more detail on that. I'm comfortable with the maintenance department lease. I'm assuming these are all contractual things. But for those other items, if they remain in this document the way that they are, I'm not comfortable approving the whole page. I will take it piecemeal if the board is open to that, but otherwise I will vote against this.
Further comments or questions from members of the board? Mrs. Kupchak.
Through the chair, to Pam, did you call central office and ask for any of the details about this in the 2 weeks since our last meeting to get the additional information on the 500,000 or any of that?
No, I did it all out here in the open for the public so that they could all be part of the process.
To ask a question?
Yes.
Well, I just would like to reiterate that this is, all of these items are, again, items that this board has already approved. There is nothing new in them, they're just moved forward. And obviously, the new board can tweak and change it. Central office was very clear with us 2 weeks ago at the meeting that they need this to start building the budget, that the new board will not even be sitting here until November 24th. Is that 2 days, I think, before Thanksgiving? I'm not assuming we're going to be able to vote on this entire thing that day. It just seems to me irresponsible to hand off to a new board and not allow central office the tools to build the budget in which they need. It can be tweaked, as we know. You get an entire budget document, and it's changed many times before it's presented to the town. I just think it just doesn't make much sense. So I would request that the board approve this and add it back in, because again, it's nothing that this board has not already approved.
Further comments from members of the board on this item? Mrs. Brand.
I understand we've had this as a discussion, and I actually still have questions about pieces of it, because I do actually remember being in the room in an RTM meeting when the Dwight bathrooms were discussed. I'm not sure, to be very honest with you. I have a full grasp on the solar systems that are going into place. But more importantly, the board that is going to be moving this forward and endorsing this and bringing it to the public and all the other town bodies is not here. So they may have questions, and I really would prefer we table it and we wait until we have a different board. They may have questions, they can ask them now, and then come to the table prepared, but as much as you may see it as something that's appropriate and timely, again, it's not this board that will be moving it forward, so I actually think it would be more appropriate if we wait. Thank you.
Helen?
Through the chair to Dr. Clark, if we were to table this tonight, what kind of a difficulty would that pose for you in building the budget? Just say missing this page.
Mr. Boyle, did you want to answer that?
Because as we build the budget, the operating pieces here would be included in our initial presentation. So there'd be opportunities for the board to ask questions. By approving this to move forward, it's not endorsing it, locking it in. The bigger issues are the capital building, the right column, the capital building project requests, which the board has to authorize the chairman of the board to send a letter to the first selectman requesting this. That is completely out of our operating budget, but it really gives directions, and there's some big ticket items that we really want to give the town bodies enough time to entertain those. The right column is the key. The non-recurring capital, those also would go through the budget process, and if you recall, that's part of the budget process that the board discusses when they adopt the budget at the end of January. With the right column, we need some direction. Which of these do you want us to move forward? And if there are those that we should not move forward, that's okay. I mean, that's really what the question is.
Mrs. Iacono?
Well, if that's the case, then I would suggest that we table the first two columns and then just concentrate on the capital budget building project request. This column of which I am completely in support of, and I will vote for the entire right-hand column. But these other two columns, I think we need to, I personally need more information.
Ms. Matola?
We're kind of going around and around in circles here. If we don't approve columns 1 and 2, they're going to be in the administration's budget that's going to come to us in January anyway. And we're going to look at it there and say, oh, we want to do that or we don't want to do it. I just think the administration wants some sense of where it should go with respect to the operating budget and non-recurring capital budget. And, you know, it's going to be our prerogative to change that in January. So either way, this is going to be in the budget. We approve columns 1 and 2 tonight, it's going to be in the budget. If we don't, they're going to put it in the budget. And they should put it in the budget because that's what they feel right now is what we need to do as a district. So, you know, I can go either way. I don't think we need to beat this to death tonight. Because one way or the other, January, we're going to be voting on columns 1 and 2.
Could I ask a question of board members? If someone were to offer an amendment to this motion that read something to the effect of that the Board of Education adopt the recommendations from the long-range facilities plan for 2010-2011 for purposes of building the budget, would board members be more inclined to be supportive of this motion? I just offer it as a suggestion. Someone will have to make a move that move and seconds that kind of an amendment. I'm only trying to do something that could bring consensus from around the table. Helen?
Yeah, that's fine if somebody wants to make that amendment. I don't think we need it though. I would support this as is because it's, as John I think said, you know,
Otherwise, we can leave it alone and vote it up and vote it down. I'm just trying to bring
I don't need
everyone
the
together if
amendment. I don't need
can.
the amendment. I will support it as it
Mrs.
is.
Cupton?
Are you suggesting to say that in the amendment?
Well, you
Because
could
it's not
add to
clear
the end
that-
of this motion that its purpose was for building the budget, which the budget is not adopted, so a lot can be changed from here until the budget's adopted. But I'm just
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying, but just
trying to
for
help the discussion along.
No, I understand, because to explain that Board of Ed members can change operating costs in a budget anytime they want, is that
No,
helpful?
no, I'm only offering a suggestion.
I mean, whatever
It helps.
works.
So we can leave it as is and we can vote the motion up or down.
If you want to change, if it makes it easier, I mean, just to reiterate what Mr. Boyle said, again, board members can cut operating budget items from the budget during the budget season at any time. So those
Mr.
items
McCullough,
can
would you
go
leave it
ahead
as
and
is
be cut.
and we'll just vote the motion?
Yeah, I don't care, but I have some language if you want to put it in there.
Well,
I
if
mean,
you
just
want to
something
offer
like-
something
I'll offer,
and if it
just to
helps.
make everyone clear that what we're doing, that the Board of Education adopt the recommendations from the long-range facility plan for 2010, 2011 for the purposes of building the 010, 011 budget, building, developing, whatever you want. Is that okay with everyone? Is that the year we're talking about? 010,
That is
011?
the year,
Got it.
11.
But that's implied.
It
so
is.
Yeah,
So-
it is implied.
I'd like just to vote on the motion.
Fine. All right, unless there's anything else from members of the board, we will go to the public on this item and this item only. Seeing none, the motion reads that the Board of Education adopt the recommendations of the long-range facilities plan for 2010, 2011. All in favor? And opposed? Voting in favor are Mr. Weber, Mrs. Kupchak, Mr. Mottola, Mrs. Elvin, Mrs. Zahn, Ms. Dodson, Mrs. Dow, and in opposition, Mrs. Brand and Mrs. Iacono. Moving on to our next item, we have a report of textbook reviewed in accordance with the administration's selection process, which will be recommended for adoption at the November 24th, 2009 business meeting of the Board of Education. Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Dr. Rosado, and it fits in so well with the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. This is a companion text that goes along with some of the curriculum that Mrs. Schmardell was presenting tonight. It is the textbook that the music department is recommending for their technology, their Music Tech 1 and Music Tech 2 courses. As you can see from the recommendation sheet, it's a relatively small amount of money. We are looking at 18 copies at Ward and 18 copies at Ludlow. This one's a little beaten up because one of the teachers actually uses this in the class, and the music department has reviewed a variety of textbooks for this curriculum, and they found that this is really the best one. You're more than welcome to take a look at it. We hope that at our next meeting, you can approve this text to go along with the curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, we have reports, and I will start with Sarah Finlaw and then with Tom Hope.
So our regular fall sports season has been ending, but today we had the boys soccer. They played one of their states games and they won, so they're advancing further on. And girls soccer is playing tomorrow, also in the states tournament. And our play is coming up. It's the first weekend in December, and it's to kill a mockingbird. Yesterday, Ludlow served as an emergency evacuation center for the homes after a crash on 95. And in conclusion, Ludlow would just like to thank the retiring Board of Education members for their service to the students.
Where's the wheelchair?
One wheelchair.
Where's my wheelchair?
Can we just say a little more about what happened at Ludlow yesterday? Because I just think Mr. Ebling and the whole staff of Fairfield Ludlow High School really deserves a commendation. Absolutely. For taking care of the members of this town who were displaced by that
very good thing either. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, over at Ward, our first marking quarter, quarter with grades is, just ended last week, and teachers will have grades in Friday and report cards out next Wednesday. So, with regards to that, everything's, smooth and going to plan. In terms of athletics, we've been fortunate to have a lot of success. Particularly, we've had state tournaments with in the girls cross country. We placed second in Class L, and our sort of front runner in the girls team, Meg Ryan, placed second overall in the race. In that particular race, it's quite a story. I don't know if you've heard of it. If you've heard it, but over at recently was the state opens, and the girls cross country came in sixth there, and now going to the New England round of that competition. And Meg Ryan once again came in second place in this race as well, but by 1 second. She's phenomenal. But poor girl's got the worst luck.
She's Irish.
But aside from girls cross country, we've got state playoffs started yesterday for both our boys and girls soccer team for field hockey as well as for volleyball. I believe the girls won their game last night, from what I heard. Moving on to more the arts, going along with our presentation of the music curriculum, our fall concerts recently took place, and now from what I hear, music students are starting to get their sheet music for the Carillon concert come December. Our fall play, I Remember Mama, is going to take place on the weekend of the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And on another note for music, actually, pianist, I believe he's a sophomore, Alex Beyer, is going to perform tonight, this weekend, with the Bridgeport Symphony Orchestra, and he's sort of their featured player of that evening. Additionally, our literary magazine, Odyssey, the volumes we put together last year have arrived, and those are being distributed. And so that's sort of all that's been going on lately in this first quarter at Ward. And we're very much looking forward to our Thanksgiving football game against Ludlow, in a couple weeks. So things are looking good.
Thank you. Moving on, Mrs. Brand.
For the Board of Health, there was a meeting last night, but I was unable to attend. I was out of town. But I will say that the overriding theme has been continuing. It's H1N1. We all are getting reports, and the health department's been wonderful, posting by school whether or not and where our status is. The only thing I would ask is, I know that parents are most inclined to look to the schools first for information, and I know from parents they're having difficulties, particularly now when it's here. I think now they want to have a grasp of what's going on. So if we could actually take the information that the health department has and just put it on the school district's website, along with, I think we had a question and answer document a while back. I think that would be helpful. I know the CDC also has a plan for K through 12. If we either make a reference for what the website is for, so that parents aren't trying to hunt around and know that we have a plan, that we will be following the CDC's recommendation, I think that would help. Because right now, my understanding is parents are becoming a little more concerned and asking each other, and I want the school district to actually be a resource. For the Fairfield Woods Building Committee, and thank you, we had a meeting this past week, and the document that I believe all the board members saw was an estimate and evaluation. Actually, the estimate will follow, but it was a very thorough analysis of the site and what some of the problems were. In essence, what they did was base comparison what they have now and versus the ed specs based on the enrollment. And what they're saying that we'll need will be another 36,927 square feet. Obviously, we need a significant amount of space, but the interesting thing is they are looking to the site to see what they can reconfigure. I will tell you that they are doing diligence and looking at whether this is going to be an option that would be something they should do that is practical in terms of doing inside the building with children in it, and if it will be economical or if they look elsewhere, but they are being very thorough. I forgot to mention the next Board of Health meeting is December 14th, and the next building committee meeting for Fairfield Woods is November 19th at 7 p.m. and there will be at a tour, and it will be at Roger Little Middle School. Thank you.
Mrs. Dow?
We'll have our next meeting next Wednesday night. Their last month's meeting, the Community Open Forum, went very well and was well attended, so our thanks to Dr. Rosado and Ms. Leonardi and the curriculum leaders for presenting that and being there for a question-answer period. And just to remind everyone that Accepted does have the quilt raffle to the Christmas festival here in town. And I reported that last month. The members now do have their tickets, so please see any member. Tickets are $5. Andrew even has tickets, so it's $5 a piece to help SEPTA, so hopefully purchase them.
Mrs. Iacono?
The only report I have is from the Communications Subcommittee, the strategic plan. I was at their meeting this evening, 6 o'clock. As you know, they're working on the Board of Education website, and we've made huge progress there. And we are looking at probably having the Finance, Budget, and Community Relations Subcommittee look at some of the content area so that we can streamline that and then present it to the board and see if we're heading in the right direction for what everybody wants. So I really have to thank them. They did a great job. I was really impressed.
Thank you. Mrs. Cutcher?
Well, no report for facilities and technology. And Kate, as you know, the convention is coming up. I'm not sure if you shared the information with the new members, which is good. I would recommend that new members attend the convention because it's a nice opportunity, especially for new members, to learn a lot of different information and to bring back some good ideas for our district. And Parks and Rec, there's no report.
Mr. Mazzoli?
I don't have a report. Stratfield's meeting tonight, and I'm here, so. I'll get an update, and we really could get very thorough updates in our packet, so.
Yeah.
But we should still get reports for the public's benefit, which we will at the next meeting.
Mr. Weber?
There was an election and the RTM kind of changed a little bit. It went from 28-22 to Democrat to 38-12, I believe.
Yes.
Republicans. So that's going to be the first issue that they're going to take up is the teachers' contract. So it should be interesting. Besides that, I have no report.
Thank you. Mrs. Zahn?
Thank you. We've been very busy in curriculum policy and special programs. Let me go through our agenda as quickly as I can. First, for our next meeting, there will be a bylaw, a proposal for bylaw change regarding electronic email. So everybody should review their bylaws prior to that meeting. We did review the recognition of religious holidays, and in conjunction with the Friday night and other evening contests, we decided to stay status quo on that, and we will revisit when we vote on the calendar for next year. We will revisit how the language regarding no evening activities for the 2 Jewish holidays would impact our sports programs. And I can thank Ms. Kupchak. We had a very long discussion about the protocol for head injuries of athletes. Dr. Skolin in the health department, we had asked the athletic directors to go back and ask them some information. Actually, this is an email from Mr. Manfredonia. He said, I spoke with Dr. Skolin this morning regarding our conversation yesterday on or in Ludlow. At this time, he would not mandate to parents that their sons' daughters have the impact test done prior to the start of an athletic season. Most physicians do not have access to the program, nor does every physician philosophically believe in its validity. By mandating or even strongly recommending the impact test be administered to all students/athletes, we would essentially be forcing students to see the few physicians in the area who have access to the program. He did mention to me that he'd be happy to attend a future policy subcommittee meeting to talk about this, in detail. So that's the information we have. The athletic directors did go into great detail about football helmets and how they're tested on a regular basis to make sure they're still accurate. It was a very thorough discussion on this.
Just ask.
Sure.
Maybe the policy committee could think of just, instead of mandating, recommending it to parents.
Well, I guess
Might
there was
not
also,
allow it.
there was discussion about cost, if we made it part of the physical, again, it got into this whole area of not every doctor does it, not every doctor believes in it, so.
Also, what about certified athletic trainer or certified medical trainer? Athletic trainer on the sidelines who makes determinations if students should be taken out of a game after a hit.
Head injury, they're supposed to be taken out of the game after.
Do we have someone who's responsible for that? Like who's in charge of it? Because they say like the coach is watching the game, he's not really watching to see if who's been hurt and how they're like acting.
That I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Well, we can ask that.
I'll just interrupt. I'm looking back at our two headmasters, if either of them want to explain. But I do know from sitting on the sidelines when something happens, the student is the slightest concern and the student is off the court, off the field. I've seen it happen. And the student is, and actually I know that the student, if they've had any blow to the head, they're not back in the game even the next day, the next week, unless they have seen a doctor and they've had clearance. And actually, where I know someone who is sitting in the audience, our two sons actually collided on the court, and her son ended up with a concussion, but he was taken out of the game right away. And they just happened to go into each other. I know from experience, Mrs. Kupchak, that they have been extremely vigilant. And I know that when one of my sons played sports and had a minor head injury, he was not back and didn't receive clearance for some time. And even when he had an injury that didn't even involve the head, it was another body
No, I
part.
understand. I mean, my son played sports as well. But I just think that it's a huge issue now, and most of the school districts are employing these certified trainers who are not involved with the game, because I know how it is. I was a sports mom for a long time, and my son was put back in games because he was a very good athlete, and I've seen other good athletes get put back in games because they want their stars on the field or they need them. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this is a big issue, and young people are getting really damaged. I just think it's something that I think the board should look a little bit more closely into. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at having an independent certified person standing there who makes the call, not the coach, but just someone else who said, that kid just got hit too hard.
Looking back, Mr. Evans would like to help us out a little.
The certified trainer is at every home game, and then the doctor is at every football game.
Oh, there is. And is that all athletic, just not football?
Yeah, all home athletic. They're on the same site, so they're called, you know.
Yes, and when we are at other sites, their athletic trainer is there as well. Their athletic trainer has pulled my son in years past out of the game at other sites. Ms. Thompson?
Go ahead.
Well, I can speak to this directly. My little brother on varsity football actually just recently was one of such cases of a head injury, and it was at an away game. But even though after a few seconds he was up, I mean he suffered a concussion, but they took all the necessary precautions. They got him on the stretcher. They took him to the hospital. They fully evaluated him. I think the measures being taken during the game are suitable for. That's as much as they can do, really.
Ms. Dodson and.
Thank you. I would just urge the new board to really go over this in excruciating detail, because we know that, there was a very frightening report actually in 60 Minutes about a month ago about how kids who played even just high school football show residual damage years later, even if they never played a day in the NFL or even in college. Yes, the big injuries get taken out, and the schools have been very vigilant, but it's not always so evident or apparent that somebody has suffered a head injury. And I just think this is something the board really needs to be aware of, needs to be educated on, and whether or not we require the baseline test is almost a side issue. The bigger issue is protecting our kids and not necessarily listening to them when they get up and say, I'm okay, I'm fine, because we know that they can suffer lifelong damage.
Thank you. Regarding the high school program of study, the course selection, additions and deletions, we also discussed that. We had asked the administration to, this goes to joint leadership. So we had asked them for a more formal process of how they would proceed in the deletion of programs, since additions we do hear about and receive. So the middle school music program before you did, social studies, world history, the change in graduation requirements, and just because we did approve that, just so you know, we will need to revise a policy saying that our graduation requirements for social studies go from 6 to 7 credits, so we'll take care of that. The Strings Music Supplemental book, which you saw, and science will be coming back to us. Thank you. And we meet on the 18th.
Anything else?
No Scholarship Foundation report, thank you.
Moving on to open board discussion. Looking, Ms. Iacono.
Sorry, I know it's late. I've had many people come up to me about my middle school curriculum, specifically the language arts program. They're concerned about the collapsing of levels there, and what they're calling lack of advanced enrichment programs at the middle school. I think I remember Monica Ty Leonard saying that you guys had formed a committee. I was wondering if sometime soon you guys could give us a report on what you're looking into there and where we are with all of these things. If you're hearing the same concerns and what the teachers are saying about these types of things.
It's actually two different groups. We're looking at the middle school gifted program, which is part of the strategic plan.
Okay.
That group has met a number of times, and we're actually meeting next week. And I've had a number of private meetings with some parents related to that. So the gifted program is a strategic planning initiative that we're looking at, and that committee is engaged. So that's one piece of that.
Okay.
The other piece is the middle school language arts program, and the administrators and I have a meeting scheduled for next week to plan an informational meeting with parents to talk that through. Because yes, there has been some concern that's come up over the summer and in the early fall. The administrators and I are going to get together, plan a forum for parents. We're not quite sure what that's going to look like yet, but it'll be probably in early December.
Fantastic, thank you. And then the only thing I had to add to that is, I guess people have had trouble finding the updated language arts curriculum on the website.
No, it's there, but what is also there is something that should be removed, and that'll be taken out.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other items for open board discussion? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Ms. Dodson, seconded by, seconded by Mr. Weber and Mrs. Custer. All in favor?
Aye.